Yeah, thanks for coming out. My name is Daniel. I put together this talk with a friend of mine, currently based in SF, Paul Carrion. So it's just going to be me today speaking, unfortunately. He's probably better at this. But yeah, so we're talking about from cockroaches to marble floors. So what happens like when you turn on the kitchen lights? Do you see cockroaches or do you see marble floors? We'll get into that later. So brief agenda, just intro, background, how did we get here, talking about how we used to see cockroaches everywhere, some of our squad goals, and then going into the Zen and the art of application maintenance, and then finally questions. I don't know where you guys lie on the memes versus no memes and talks debate. There's going to be memes in this. If you are on the other side, you can leave if you want. It's only going to hurt my feelings a little bit, but it's okay. I'll probably be able to create better memes for the next talk. So who are we? Paul has built 10 plus years developing industrializing software products, and with a more recent focus on software delivery. I have over 15 years of experience basically working across DevOps, IT, security, etc. That's what all those words really mean. Currently working as a senior DevSecOps, whatever, architect, and formerly director of security at Attapar, a financial, say fintech company based in like SF. So yeah, we've all seen these like headlines. There's a shortage of security people. Security jobs are going to be like growing like crazy. Like we need to like fill in these gaps. So how do we do it? Some of the different ways that people are looking at this is DevSecOps, trying to integrate security more into like the DevOps model, get the earlier on, let's focus on like builds, to cybersecurity boot camps, different sorts of things, trying to get people at least the basic skills that they need, not to mention tons and tons of different certificates, etc. So what we did practically, so I was running DevOps IT and security at Attapar, 3 different silos traditionally. And what I came up with was like infraops. So this is kind of before like DevSecOps. I actually presented with our security engineers at DerbyCon in 2015. So you can go find that talk. Yeah, but trying to bring these like 3 different like silos together. The fact is, like if you talk about like the CIA triad, like confidentiality, integrity and availability, like each of those like disciplines like that actually matters like at the core. Like maybe like if you're talking to someone like DevOps SRE, like maybe they don't care about security like directly, but if you tell them that their boxes got popped and they get to spend like the whole weekend like rebuilding everything, like yeah, they actually care. Like, and it's important like at the infrastructure level. No one wants to like redo this like stuff like over and over again. So just kind of like codifying those things like at the base level. And the same thing goes like for the IT side as well. Like if your machine gets with like ransomware, for example. I mean that's the cool thing du jour. Like having like Baltimore, having some of these hospitals like spend their like weekends, weeks like rebuilding all these like systems. Like the fact is like they do care about security like at the base level. And so just trying to like work across like these different teams and try to bring some of these like base ideas to each of the teams. And then a few years into that, Paul actually had the opportunity to take on the the QA team. And so him like bringing on the QA team, the fact is like when we're talking about like application like maintenance, like they actually have a lot of the same goals that we do. We talk about them like in different ways. We'll kind of go over that. So yeah, so we wanted to like bring across each of these like teams together and like figure out like a common language so that we can all move forward. And then actually spend most of our time like getting beers. So some of the knowledge that got quickly transferred from like InfraOps to QA, building a review process to be understanding of like how code changes are actually coming about. So actually having like a full view of like all the dependencies and how like each of the individual commits, et cetera, are actually coming through. It's one of the things that we really needed for the QA team. Before, it was kind of more of like, oh, we have a bunch of new code, it changed, let's try to figure out what happened. We've talked about security advocates before, so creating like quality advocates as well. Adding more information to our automation pipeline, treating it like code, like figuring out like how CI/CD is actually going to work, like trying to integrate like QA as soon as possible, like into the build pipeline. Another one being a consultant. So security often acts as this, as like features are going through, or like as they're building a new product. So having QA like be in that process as early as possible. Consulting, like how are we going to think about testing this? How are we going to make sure that it's built to spec and built properly? Actually leveraging tools where possible to like scale the QA team. Like you can't, I mean you can try, you can add just more and more people like at the problem, or you can try to use like Jenkins, et cetera, to try to scale some of the things that can be repeatable and automatable. And then finally, diversity. So goats, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this term, but a goat eats anything that you put in front of it. So like finding the goats in your organization. Finding like the people like in QA, in security, like here's a problem, like I'm just gonna go after it. I'm gonna tackle it, it doesn't matter like what it is. So, I mean, basically, just kind of like thinking about this like back and forth, like, aren't we all just actually hunting bugs? Like that's what it's based, I mean, it's really what security is doing, right? Like you are trying to find like security bugs specifically. QA doesn't really care, they're just trying to find bugs. DevOps, hopefully they don't find any bugs and get paid for it. But from the customer, they don't really care. Is it a bug, draft, elephant? I just fix it. I want the application to work. Meanwhile, QA, DevOps, and security are looking at the elephant. We've been thinking about this for a while, but I wanted to highlight this. Dino is the head of security for the Cash App at Square. He actually put this out there, September 10th, so not too long ago. And I think this really encapsulates what we are trying to get at. Like, the fact is, like, if you have application security bugs, you're probably going to have a lot of other bugs. Like, if you scroll through the changelog for the Linux kernel, for example, there might be 2 security bugs and 20 non-security bugs. And so the fact is, like, we're just trying to find like bugs. Like, it doesn't really matter, and we need to take a more holistic approach of like trying to find bugs across the application, across like whatever we're building. So talking about some of our squad goals, like individual squad goals. We each had like different types of goals that we were actually trying to measure ourselves. DevOps was more about the metrics of like how we're doing across stories, et cetera, number of incidents, how long it takes to actually recover. InfoSec was how many bugs did we find? Like, what was their CVE? Like, what sort of like matrix can we establish from there on like how bad these bugs are. And QA is just like, well, I want to make sure I find all of the bugs like before it goes out, and what happens when we didn't find like critical bugs, like how many of those are, like how could we change our methods. So instead, we tried to think about our new squad goals, and really try to focus on like the build pipeline health, and less about like trying to find like what happened like after. So like mean time to like resolution. So we found a bug on production. How long did it take to actually find it? Did we find it? Did our customers find it? And then how long did it actually take for us to fix it? Because what ends up happening is that's all like toil, like time that QA, DevOps, security doesn't actually want to spend like doing things. You have to like scramble, you get paged, and that doesn't give you the time to like invest in the actual building that you want. Similar mean time to failure, and downplaying the number and the severity of the bugs like less. Like so just trying to like an overall picture of like the build health. Let's try to make sure that we're finding bugs sooner, and less time with toil and trying to figure out like what's going on in production. One of the other things that we were trying to do was not scale linearly. Like the fact is, like we couldn't hire like fast enough across like InfoSec, SRE, like QA. Like you could like just add like 10 more QA people to just kind of like bang on it. You can try to add 10 more people in security. It's been difficult for me to add like one. Same with DevOps as well. Like, there's only so much you can do to like linearly scale like people. So trying to find ways to like automate the areas where we can, and like have like people focus on like the actual like human problems. Realignment and like having us all like think about like kind of the same like metrics instead of having like us each going off in like 3 different directions. Like, oh, I only care about like the number of stories that I like completed, or I only care about like that we found like 4 security bugs, etc. But having like all across these 3 teams like rethink about this like holistically. No, like we're trying to like put out a product out there. We're trying to make our own lives better by not like having us like get paged at like 3 a.m. like after a release or whatever happens. But having like thinking holistically across these 3 teams instead of having like 3 different teams have like one central goal. It really worked out well for us. So yeah, like thinking holistically across like these 3 teams. Being able to like leverage existing solutions, like maybe DevOps is doing something that QA can leverage. Maybe they're doing some sort of like load testing like on production. Like how are you like testing in production? Well, maybe we can do that for early on in the pipeline. If we can have like less of this like pageable like maintenance, we can actually increase like our general like value, like what we're doing. If we're getting paged less, the fact is most of us are gonna like sleep better. We're gonna like enjoy work like more, and have more time for investment instead of like constantly being paged and like focused on like the toil. It burns people out quickly. I'm not sure if anyone has ever dealt with burnout here, dealing with that sort of thing, but trying to like reduce that. And then ultimately, communication, documentation. Having these like different teams come together, like it forces like each of the different teams to focus on documentation, and it opens up like whole new like lines of thinking. Like QA they're like, okay, well yeah, I'm trying to see if the application like works this way, but not necessarily thinking, well, how does permissions like work into that? Like I want to make sure that if I put X in, I get Y out. Well, what if you are a different level of permissions? Does that still work? and just having the people like bring together and talk about these things, we can all learn together. So what are some of the things that InfoSec can learn from QA? Testability. Maybe you guys are great at it. Maybe you're not. But having some of the more like processes around like user stories, etc. Having behavior-driven design, and just having like understandable rules. More relevant here, like what can you guys like teach QA? Sure, you use Burp, and I feel that's a much better solution out there for exploratory testing. I mean, that's what a lot of like security testing is exploratory testing. Focusing on pruning. I mentioned earlier, just talking about like different levels of like access. So you might think about like jumping levels, trying to focus on like the testing surface. Having an idea of like dependencies, and like how like each of the parts of the system can interact. Fuzzing, if you guys are into like fuzzing, like that actually can not just find like security bugs, but can find like regular bugs that QA is going to be like interested in. Static analysis. So we built a tool to try to help the security team so they didn't have to like review like every pull request, everything that came in. Let's focus on like, oh, if there's changes to permissions or if there's changes to this. Reusing those tools for QA. Maybe they want to find out about like schema changes. Maybe they've gotten through things they don't necessarily understand through different features. Maybe they want to like focus on that. And again, just focusing on how the code is changing. So some of the things that we were focusing on in the future, end-to-end tests, so we can help define like what's important, what's normal, and then can use those for other tests, using like ZAP, etc. Focusing on like environment provision, setup, reuse, load testing. That has a lot of different like connotations of it. Like, well, where does our application like fall over? Like where, if we're worried about denial of service, like we're kind of looking at it from like the opposite side, right? So yeah, just trying to focus on like load testing, and again like fuzzing. Like the more that we can like leverage that like in testing, you have less of the QA trying to put in like random things to see what happens. We can have like machines do that. So some of the ways that you can get started, just trying to implement and gain more metrics out of your program. Maybe you can talk about DevSecOps. That's a cool buzzword now. Maybe you can actually get buy-in from like leadership, etc. And actually talking to QA, like if you guys are working in like application security, when's the last time you like talked to someone from QA? Can you like name a lot of your QA team? The fact is, I've actually interviewed a number of people that used to be in QA and have made the jump to security testing. They were general QA, and what they found was that they started to be more interested in like general security testing. And we found in our own company that there was actually a lot of people that started to like be like interested in that. Like, oh, this is like, I never really thought about this way. I kind of just thought about like breaking the app in general, but now like focusing on security bugs. And then finally, are there any like great jumping off points for like end-to-end tests, for example? Is there things where you can bring your security knowledge to maybe like build those out in a different way? Yeah, that's all I got. Any questions?
What fuzzing framework do you use?
So we haven't had enough time to like build that out like specifically. It's been more of a general idea than actually being able to put that into practice. Can you repeat the question, I guess?
Yeah, so like being able to observe like the data and the outcomes, like what tooling are you using to look at that kind of stuff? Across those roles, right? Because I know that QA has a different data set compared to production, for example, right? Like what would you see as maybe differentiated or common between those different personas?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is still like focusing on the bugs and like the number of incidents that happen and trying to figure out like the mean time to like resolution. Like, are we still like having like incidents? Are these things that we could have caught like earlier in the pipeline?
What kind of data sources are you looking at for that?
Mostly just like using like Jira and like more qualitative than like quantitative.
Right. Are you looking at anything like trace logs or debug logs as part of that process as well?
Yeah, it generally comes out of like the incident like process as we're like running through the incident and trying to figure out like what's happening. Honestly, we're still trying to figure out. So if you guys have questions or can help us out, I'm all ears.
Last question.
Sure.
What would be your ideal circumstance in terms of automation for this kind of stuff? Like, what would you like to automate that you can't today?
I mean, all of it. No, I think yeah, trying to build a lot more of the test cases like earlier on. And trying to figure out like where we can build more of the automation like in the testing framework. Like a lot of times I feel like unit tests and some of like the tests that we've done, like, I mean, they're testing was built, but it's not really.
Like what's expected.
Yeah.
It's like actual. Yeah.
Like I don't know if you guys seen like the joke like going around. QA walks into a bar, orders 1 beer, orders -1 beer, orders like UI X35. Customer walks in the bar, asks where the bathroom is, the bar blows up. Like how do we get to like that? Like we're testing 0, 1, like throwing in some of this like random input, but like customers comes in, like we're not like testing like the actual like real world things that are happening.
That's why I was asking about fuzzy, because I thought it was kind of relevant. But like AFL, for example, is great for local binaries and stuff, but I don't know what's good for web or whatever.
Yeah, Paul's been looking at that more, so he can actually answer that better than I can.
So you mentioned static code analysis, and that's something I found really interesting because there's a lot of different ways that people use that term, and very few of them are actually like the intended meaning of it. When you say static code analysis, it sounded like you were doing some sort of process of looking at specific components within your code that are being modified. Is that like custom tooling, or are you using a third-party application for that?
So for that specifically, it was custom tooling. So it was originally a project that some of our security engineers worked with Prezi on, and then ended up creating a whole new thing. And Robert wrote that. He's currently a security engineer at Robinhood, presented at TourCon in 2016, I think. Yeah, so that was just something like custom that we wrote.
And specifically looking at like files, or is it looking at components within the code?
Specifically looking at like files and like components. Honestly, it's a way to like manage like regular expressions or like changes like in dependencies. Yeah, but we've also have like a number of different like security, like other like static analysis things, traditional. So. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you.